So what's your podcast about?
Superheroes.
It's a little geeky, but I think you guys are gonna like it.
Try not to be too geeky.
No, I can't promise that.
Should we begin?
It's a bird. It's a plane. It's the Geek and You Shall Find podcast. And now, your hosts, Kelsey Dickerson, Brad Fay, and Noah Berlin.
Hold on to your butts.
Welcome to Geek and You Shall Find, the podcast powered by Superhero Faces. Now, if you're watching on YouTube or even if you're listening, you may notice that we are down a comrade. Kate is being Chicago Myers, having a great time with her family, so she will be missed this episode. But don't you worry, Brad Fay, Noah Berlin, and myself, Kelsey Dickerson, have you covered when it comes to everything Rings of Power, Episode 3, Adar, or according to Noah, maybe it's Adar. But guess what? We are very inclusive here when it comes to pronunciations because we're just not sure how to say it. And even characters in these movies and shows say it differently too. So thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to please share and follow at Superhero Faces on Twitter, Facebook, and superhero_faces on Instagram. So you can keep up to date with everything with our podcast, documentary, and docu-series. Now, before we're going to jump to Noah for some nerdy news, of course, if you haven't watched the episode yet, there are going to be some spoiler alerts as we talk through it. But we also want to remind you that we haven't read a lot of the Lord of the Rings books. We're just huge fans. Brad has read the Silmarillion because he is just better than us at reading. So, you know, what can we say? But we are so thankful for you guys tuning in with us this week and each and every week. And with that, Noah, please take it away with nerdy news.
Thank you. Happy to do it. So nerdy news of the week. The big news is all coming out of the D23 Expo, which kicked off this weekend. It's basically Disney's official fan club expo and essentially the Comic-Con of just Disney stuff. So whether it's Lucasfilm, Marvel Studios, 20th Century Fox, as well as Disney content, a lot of announcements were made over the course of the weekend. So I just want to talk about a couple of those that really were of note to me. And obviously this is being recorded on Saturday afternoon. So there could be some more announcements that are coming up after this. So that would be the reason that I miss anything in this list. So we saw trailers, new trailers for the new season of The Mandalorian. It looks really awesome. We also got a sequel to the animated Clone Wars, Bad Batch, all that. It's going to be called Tales of the Jedi, and it's going to be done in different mini episodes, almost like What If, where there'll be different stories each episode. We saw Secret Invasion, as well as Werewolf by Night. We saw trailers for all of these. We also got first looks for Indiana Jones #5, which will be Harrison Ford's last time reprising the role of Indy. The series Ahsoka, The Little Mermaid, a live action Little Mermaid. I know. And Inside Out 2 coming out of Pixar, which will be great. And a prequel to The Lion King called Mufasa, The Lion King. So excited about all those. We also got announcements about a Captain America and Black Panther video game that's going to be done by Skydance. It's going to be taking place during World War II. So that should be pretty cool. We got announcements for Armor Wars, as well as a Scarlet Witch solo movie starring Elizabeth Olsen. But unfortunately for all the people like myself, we're very excited to hear some casting decisions for Fantastic Four. We did not get any Fantastic Four news today. So that is unfortunate, and we'll still be on pins and needles waiting and guessing who the cast for that is going to be whenever they announce it.
Maybe we'll have to add some nerdy news to our House of the Dragon episode this week when we record it. You know, I know that you wanted to stay away with it because we have so much to talk about with House of the Dragon, but you never know. Yeah, I feel like every other tweet that I've seen this weekend has been from the Disney Expo. It's absolutely incredible. I'm super excited about Little Mermaid. It is my favorite Disney classic. So I can't wait for that. She sounds absolutely beautiful. The graphics look incredible. She literally looks like she's in the ocean while she's singing. The hair and everything is just absolutely beautiful. And then Mufasa, I'm interested to see what part of that, like, does he start as a little cub, like where Simba starts out?
And it was Billy Eichner and Seth Rogen are reprising their roles as young Timon and young Pumbaa in the movie as well.
Cute. Oh my goodness. So cute. Brad, are you especially excited about any of those?
Yeah, it's fun. It's funny you said the Little Mermaid. Well, a lot of those. I haven't even gotten to watch everything yet. I'm like really excited to spend a good chunk of the day going through watching a lot of the ones Noah just mentioned. It's just funny that you mentioned Ariel being underwater. This morning I watched. There's a on Disney Plus. There's a like a mini documentary. It's like an hour about the making of the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. And Ewan McGregor shares the story of like the first day he was on set with George Lucas, and George Lucas was like taking him around to see everything, and they see the big submarine that they're underwater in the Phantom Menace at one point, and Ewan McGregor is like, "That's so cool! So we're gonna be like underwater in this," and George Lucas is like, "No, you don't really go underwater. That's like made up." And Ewan McGregor's like, I felt like the biggest dumbass. Like, I'm like, oh, like Ewan McGregor's like, this guy probably thinks like I think like, oh, we really go to space in these spaceships and stuff like that. So I just thought it was a really funny story about like being underwater, reminded me of that.
George Lucas is like, who the hell hired this man? Have you ever been on a movie set before?
It's crazy. They show footage of them, like their first day meeting, and Ewan McGregor literally looks like, I mean, he's not like in a starter jacket, but you know, he talks about like, I wasn't a person that would ever be in stuff. Like I was doing indie movies. I was like an unestablished actor doing like these like punk indie films. And he's like on set wearing like this like puffy starter jacket almost. It's like
a starter jacket. I wish I was in a starter jacket right now.
Yeah, it's like one of those things, like it's definitely come back. I'm like, yo, he looks kind of cool, but it's just so weird to see like Ewan McGregor like rocking that style.
Yeah, that's funny.
Lord almighty. Can you imagine though? That's so crazy to go from indie films to one of the largest franchises of all time and something that has such a huge stardom. So, well, good thing Ewan McGregor is an amazing actor. Now, of course, like we mentioned in the beginning of this episode, we are going to be outlining everything that is Lord of the Rings of Power, episode 3. So as I recall, we leave on a lot of cliffhangers at the end of episode 2. And this episode really only follows the journeys or the storylines of Galadriel, Nori, and really Arendir. And then Arendir. Yeah. So this is really focused on that. So before we really dive into it, there's some really important things that we see and that we're introduced to in this episode. So to give us a little bit more background and context, we're going to the expert Noah Berlin to help us set this stage. Like I mentioned, these always help me out so much. So hopefully they help our viewers and listeners out too, because I always love this part of our episodes.
Yeah, that's the idea, right? I mean, I watch these things and I get excited about it. I want to learn more. And so I love kind of putting this stuff together so it makes more sense in my mind and provides that context. So that's what this is for. So in episode 3 of Rings of Power, we travel to the island of Numenor, which is one of the greatest civilizations in the history of Middle-earth. Before I get into that and its significance within Tolkien's story, I want to explain a little bit about some of the powerful beings that have the influence over the world of Arda. That's the name of the world, Arda. So Eru Ilúvatar was the name of the supreme deity. He's the single creator of the world and the one true God, if you will. So Eru created a power structure to assist him with shaping of the world, including 14 demigods, which are called the Valar. Eru also created some lesser but still powerful beings called the Maiar, which are kind of like angels if you think about it. So you have Eru at the top as the one true God, the Valar under there, and then the Maiar under there. So Gandalf, Saruman, the other 3 wizards that came to Middle-earth during the Third Age are some of these Maiar, as well as Sauron. Sauron was one of the Maiar as well. Morgoth was one of the Valar who strayed from the path of his creator Eru and sought to dominate and weave his dark thoughts into the creation of the universe when it was still being formed. So basically all evil that's present in Middle-earth all stems from Morgoth.
What dick.
Morgoth, what an asshole. Morgoth's corruption spread across Middle-earth, and his rise of power divided the race of men. Some chose to side with this Dark Lord, and others stood against him. So after he was defeated, the Valar raised the island of Numenor from the sea. It was kind of like Atlantis. It was raised from the sea, this island, and it was gifted to the men who chose the right side and fought against Morgoth. The Numenorians were also granted extended lifespans, and they possessed both enhanced strength and tremendous wisdom. These were all the gifts given by the Valar to these humans who did the right thing and fought for the right side. So the nation that was built there on the island was originally founded by Elros, who was the twin brother of Elrond, and he became Numenor's first king after the War of Wrath. So like Elrond, Elros was half elf, but unlike his brother, he chose to forsake his elven half to live the mortal life of a man. Wow. So for a while, the bond between the elves from Valinor and the humans in Numenor was really strong. There was trade. They would come and go from the shores of Numenor and have a good relationship. But as we've seen in this episode, things have changed. The royal Numenorian line has taken a very anti-elf stance, and there's a lot of conflict there where elves aren't trusted or allowed on their shores. And so when Galadriel and Halbrand arrive on the island in this episode, the conflicts start there.
Man, yeah, that's definitely a lot to break down. Yeah, because Galadriel is kind of like, oh, where are we? And things are kind of moving in her mind, but we're not sure why. And then we hear little bits and pieces about, she says like little things here and there about what it is and that her kind isn't welcome. We hear that the king has basically been exiled or is like held captive because of his views of the elves. So do we know, is the king that you mentioned, is that Elrond's half brother still the king that is reigning, or no, because he gave up his elfhood so he wouldn't live as long?
His elfhood, yes. when he chose to be straight up a man, a mortal, and so he still lived a really long life as the Numenorians did, but he was immortal, so he was a mortal. So he died hundreds of years prior to the events of this show picking up. And so when Galadriel is with Elendil, and they're looking up the history, and you see the painting of Elrond on one side with the elves and Elros on the other side with all the humans, they're kind of going into that story there. But at this point, Elros is long dead.
Okay. It's very interesting. Yeah, I think Numenor is absolutely gorgeous. And I love that it's a star-shaped island. I don't know why. I just love that point. Oh. Now, we're going to get right on into, so thank you so much for setting the stage. We're going to get right on into our MVPs. Brad, I'm going to start with you. Who or what was this episode's MVP for you? We didn't see a lot of the storylines, but there was definitely a lot of great stuff happening in this episode.
Yeah, I love this episode so much. Like, this episode like crushed it. It just brought me right in, right from the start to finish. I was like all in on this. But you said this might be a heavy Numenor episode, and I'm gonna start right off. Like, Numenor was my MVP. Just seeing how beautiful it looked. I mean, that's such a hard thing. I always like tried to visualize what that was gonna look like on screen, and never thought it could just be something that, I mean, my jaw literally dropped like when they said Numenor, because I wasn't sure if it was going to be included on the show, just because once Noah had talked about like the rights and they're being like, well, they could do this, but not this. I was like, crap, I don't know where Numenor falls into that. Maybe I shouldn't have gotten my expectations so high. But, when they finally said like it's the most island, West Island, I was like, oh, we're gonna get it. And then from there I was just like in, and it did not disappoint. I can't think of a mythological world or anything brought to life that looked cooler than that ever. I really tried to think of something. I mean, we haven't gotten to really see Valeria like at its high point in Game of Thrones. Maybe that would look similar, but I can't think of anything that was like a city as visually stunning as Numenor was.
Yeah, it was awesome. And you actually saw when the boat pulled in, you see the huge statues of the figures. That was Elros, who the first king of Numenor, but who we see there. But yeah, it was stunning. It was stunning to look at, and just you see how much money was put into the show, and it really it's shown off there. They're showing off.
I mean, it might have looked better than Rivendell looked in the movies. Like, and again, that's how much money they put into this. Is like they're not playing. Like, they're not messing up.
You got to think that the Lord of the Rings movies came out like 20 years ago.
For sure.
Dates all of us, which is very sad. No, I agree. It was absolutely gorgeous. And it's funny because Galadriel actually mentions, she's like, oh, you should have seen it when it first started. So obviously that's kind of a dig at like how it's either been kept up or any changes that the Numenors have made since they've been gifted this island. Well, not gifted, earned with blood, which I think you can make an argument for either of those. But yeah, absolutely wonderful MVP. Did you have another one, Noah?
Yeah, I do. My MVP is Elendil, and it's partially for what he did in this episode, but partially just for who he is and what he means to the story going forward. We'll talk about that in a little bit. I don't know if I want to necessarily go into that yet, but he's the captain on the boat that picks up Galadriel and Halbrand, and he brings them to Numenor. His name translates to elf friend in the elven language of Quenya, and that is what he is. And you just see how the powers that be in Numenor really are against the elves. They're really against everything that it means to be pointy ears and elves and what they did throughout the years. So it was cool to see him kind of still represent a little bit and take Galadriel out to his what was it called, his Hall of Lore, where they found some history, and really it sets her on course for what she needs to be doing at that point. So he crushed it. His family is super important. We'll get to that a little bit later as well. And I don't know, I liked his quote where he was just always like, the sea is always right. The sea is always right. And the Queen Regent was like, well, the sea can't commit treason, you can.
The Queen Regent was not messing around in this episode. She just was not having it with anybody. I thought her and Galadriel were actually going to go like hand to hand.
Right? But yeah, so Elendil was my MVP.
Wonderful MVP. And I do love that too. So I mean, obviously in a lot of these fantasy worlds, they put so much emphasis, like we talked about in our last episode of House of the Dragon, whether it's prophecy or dreams or, anything that kind of, any signs that come to them. So like when they're all saying like, well, our paths crossed for a reason, or like, we found you for a reason, like you've come here for a reason. Obviously that kind of foreshadows the importance of it and probably what we're going to see in the future. But I just love that because I'm also a believer in, in our own world of like the universe and things happening for a reason sometimes to be able to put you in the place that you need to be. So I just like those. But I have 2 MVPs that are tied for me. The first one is Poppy, because I was kind of a hater on her in the first couple episodes, but I really love the scene with her and Nori where they're trying to get the star scrolls and she's like, oh, I think there's only a few minutes left. And like, the way that she was saying stuff was just so funny and cute. It was just really cute. And just shows that, that they are truly so, they're so close and they're just adorable. I think we all had friends like that growing up that you always get into mischief with, and friends that you would always go to bat with no matter if you're going to get in trouble or not. So that was really cute. And then obviously at the end when she stays behind with the family. And I think we kind of see an insight into her too, that maybe she doesn't have any family. Maybe some of them were the left behinds, or what do they call them? The left behinds, or not left behinds, but you know what I'm talking about?
I've got some notes on that, but I
do as well.
Yeah. I like the left behinds. I mean, that's what they are.
Yeah.
Maybe that's also foreshadowing a part in this podcast, me mentioning that. And then obviously Arendir, I think we're going to dive into him a little bit more, but he was just really badass in this scene. We don't really see him fighting. We see him, doing a lot of scouting in the first couple episodes. So those moments were really cool to me, and just seeing him like fight and like do some of that stuff.
He was a badass, huh?
Say that again?
He was a badass, huh?
He was a badass. Like some of those scenes, like I think we're going to dive into it a little bit later, but some of those scenes were just like, oh my gosh, like you just don't see what you hadn't seen that before. And you really aren't seeing, you get glimpses like Galadriel in the first episode when she killed the snow troll and things like that, but we don't really see a lot of those fighting scenes quite yet. So that was just a good insight into that and what's to come when there are fighting scenes, hopefully in the future, and how well they're going to be done. But on the opposite end of the spectrum, let's get into our LVPs. Who was the least valuable player? And it's actually kind of ironic because I think everyone started their fantasy football stuff this week as well. Hopefully your teams are doing better than mine. But yeah, Brad.
One game so far, so.
Well, it's just I'm going against someone that has Cooper Kupp in their team. So I am just not starting off well, even though I have no points yet. No one's played yet. So that's how much I believe in my team.
I mean, my LVP is clearly the orc who offered the fake water ration. Like, you don't do that. Like, I don't care who you are with you don't give a water ration and then slit someone's neck. That's just so grimy. And I was like appalled. Like when that scene took place, I was like, I just have it out for that dude. I want that guy to get his just desserts so bad, because he killed the character that I've been calling Bizarro Quicksilver. And I was just like so sad to see that guy go, especially like in such a brutal fashion of thinking he's getting a water ration and then now he's gone. So that was my LVP of the episode.
He used to live in a civilized time when orcs behaved respectfully, right? It's unbelievable.
The orcs are decent, man. Like, they were like, oh, speaking out human, here's your water ration for your platoon. I'm like, okay, we're getting some common ground here.
Good people. They're misunderstood, these orcs.
Yeah, the albino orcs, they don't play by anyone's rules, Brad, all right? They're a different breed, okay? They are only underground and they're going to be sneaky and they're going to make people do stuff for them. So I knew, so when I think everyone was expecting it to be poisoned and I thought maybe they were just faking like drinking it and then, but it was like, why did he pick that guy? Like, well, I know all the guys like
it's true.
He picked the stinky rotten leaf stinky guy. Like, why?
I thought it was gonna be like orc urine, and they were like, you're drinking orc urine. And he just like slit his neck. So
Brad is not in line for the orc shenanigans happening right now.
Yeah, like what happened with Jaime Lannister when they chopped his hand off, and then they gave him what he thought was water, and it was piss, and they're all laughing at him.
That's right.
I got a really good LVP, a really good one. So this one, I'm sure you guys will identify with. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about. My LVP is Blovo Bolgerbuck. You guys familiar? You remember Blovo? No. Okay, so let me refresh your memory. So in the very somber scene where Sadok, who is the elder of the Harfoot, he's doing a whole in memoriam segment about all of the people that fell behind during past migrations, and it's really somber. You see people are crying, everyone's remembering them. We will wait for you. That's their call after they say the names of these people, and they talk about these Harfoot who died. They were killed by being stuck in the snows of a mountain pass. They were killed in a landslide. They were killed by wolves, and everyone's very emotional. And then all of a sudden he goes, Blovo Balgerbuck. Got him. He's like bees, and everyone's laughing. And Blovo, and then he's like, yeah, we all loved him, but he was an idiot, and everyone's cracking up. I'm like, damn, the disrespect that Blovo Balgerbuck is getting, man. Everyone is sad about everyone except for this dude. So man, he's just taking stray L's long after he's gone. So he's my LVP for sure.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, I did have a note. It just says Harfoot people are grimy. Like, I think they're starting to really show their like true colors. Like the dad at one point, I think his name's Largo. The guy with the injured foot is like, oh, no one's ever been left behind. You know that. And then we got to a scene about a bunch of people who were left behind. And they said, we will wait for you. I'm like, you didn't wait for shit. Like, they died stuck in the snow. And then they're like, yeah, you're going to go at the end of at the trail. I'm like, I don't get how we go from no one's ever been left behind to literally a memoriam of everyone who's been left behind.
And when the dude first started talking, he is like, when people are left behind, they're never really left behind. I was like, oh, okay, that's good. So that means like they wouldn't actually leave, dude in the family. And then he's like, no, they're like physically they're left behind and they're dead. They're fucking dead. But like in our hearts, they're not really left behind. I'm like, okay, all right, Sadok.
There's some gaslighting going on in Hartford.
Yeah.
He's like, but you guys, you with a broken foot and you only have like 2 little girls and a wife to be able to carry this huge car, you guys are going to be in the way back. So good luck to you. He's like, not the way back, right? Like the middle back. And they're like, no,
we should
the back.
talk about this. We should talk about this. Nah, man.
I know. I will say that is kind of messed up. It does, like, obviously some of them sounded like you can't really do anything about it, but it is really funny. But it kind of reminds me, I really liked the chant that they would say. Oh, it's like, nobody goes off trail and nobody goes alone or something like that. And I was like, oh, I bet like the national parks would love this scene. Like that's basically their motto. No, but that was kind of messed up.
The dude who got stung by the bee, do you think he even like died right away? Or was he like, did they just hate that guy to begin with? He got stung by a bee and they were like, yo, let's bail. And he's like, no, I'll be okay. Just give me a second. And they were like, no, we gotta go, man. That's really a shame. You didn't make it. And now they're like,
you gotta stay on path, bro. I'm sorry.
I'm like,
they're all probably like,
I'm fine.
They could have swatted those bees away, I'm sure. I'm sure no effort was given to help that guy.
Lovo Balgerbuck, man.
They're all just like hiding in their little bushes. He's like literally sitting there for like an hour, like being stung slowly.
Like Bactine or like ointment or whatever the fuck.
They probably have some remedies for bee stuff. They're probably just like, oh, one person died by bees, or we all get like a couple stings. So let's just have like heals like the annual sacrifice. Plus, if you probably look at it, I bet bees are like one of the like top things of people dying from, like I would guess, from bee stings, like in our world. I bet like a lot more people than probably die from bee stings. So it's probably not that uncommon versus like dying in a snow slide or being attacked by a wolf. Like, come on, we got to give him a little bit of credit.
I forgot about the wolf person.
The wolf person.
That one sounded brutal.
Oh man, that would absolutely, I know. But at least you're kind of, say that again?
I was just asking if you have an LVP.
Oh, no, I don't really have an LVP. I guess if I did have an LVP, actually, it would be the Queen and the Numenors, the ones that have kind of shied away from the elves and just really kind of closed their doors. I think we see that a lot in our own world of, people being really closed off to others and just not being able to have that conversation. Like, it's also really funny too, because in one of the parts that they're going, like Galadriel is like a hero. Like people really know who she is. She's the commander of the elves army, I guess. Yeah, so the elves army. And they have that little puppet thing talking about how she's been a protector of the realm. And so it's just really sad to see, because I think there's a lot of commonalities that you can draw between what they're going through there and then things that like people go through in our own world, even in our own country. So I would say they're the LVPs for me, the people that aren't open and accepting.
Yeah, I hear that, but the puppet show was actually hating on her. It wasn't supporting her. It was like, oh, I'm Galadriel, I'm here as the elf. And they're like, you're not going to kill our queen elf. And then they kill.
Oh, I thought it was showing her as a hero.
No, it was not. It was hating on her.
But they should have made her like more monstrous looking, like, because I was like kind of confused by that. She seemed like the way she was all like dainty and sweet, it was kind of like misleading, where I was like, you would think they'd be like, elves have fangs and like they'll eat children.
Well, they know what they look like. It's not just myth, right? But I think that they were just showing that, like, they're all just super xenophobic.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
Which is ironic because they were literally gifted this. The elves brought this island up from the bottom of the sea to give to them.
Well, I thought that was interesting too, because obviously that had happened a while ago, right? But when Galadriel said to the queen, she's like, you were given this land by the elves, by the Valor. And she's like, we weren't given anything. And like, that's just how they look at it, man. They are very anti-elf and like, hey, we worked hard for what we have. We paid in our blood and this is ours now. And we're not going to owe anybody anything. And that's
I thought that was an interesting interaction. I really like that point, because I think that's a fair point. Like, yo, you didn't give us this just to be nice. Like, people died to help make the world a better place, and like we were, like gifted this as like our compensation for it. Like, you didn't just decide, like, you could have given this to us for free, but you didn't until like we helped you with something. So I thought that was cool, like to see both sides of that argument.
Definitely, yeah, good scene for sure.
And that is an interesting dynamic too. Like you guys mentioned, obviously the elves are like these magical beings that do have all these gifts and all these things to offer that regular humans and some of the other creatures just don't have access to. So when you're constantly being given stuff, like Noah mentioned in the beginning of the episode, like, they were taller, they lived longer, they were like given like extra intelligence or like more intelligence. And they were like, there was a lot of stuff exchanged between the Numenors and elves. Like that creates a dynamic of like, oh, well, we're doing all this stuff for you that we have access to. It's usually just for us. Like, you know what I mean? So I wonder if it's just like after so long, they're like, wait a second, like you guys are holding this over our heads. Like we didn't ask for you to do all this. Like we fought and you guys decided to do this for us. So why are you holding it above our heads? So, I mean, I guess that's just an interesting dynamic to look at it. And you can make arguments for both, but at the same time, like being open and just being able to be communicative and just like not be xenophobic and almost like really racist in a way. It's just, that's never the answer. But speaking of elves, moving on to best scene for me, I mean, I kind of foreshadowed a little bit. I kind of talked about it. I really loved the scene. We were talking about this before the podcast. You guys mentioned it too, how cool it was to see all the elves working together. They came up with a plan to be able to fight against the orc and hopefully for at least one of them to be able to escape, to be able to go tell the elves like, hey, all this stuff is happening. There's still all these orcs. There's the huge, like, black power that is, just like going underground and being unseen in the Southlands. So just being able to see that fight scene and just some of those slow motion, like Arendir in the air and them using the chains, like I thought it was really badass. That was absolutely my favorite scene. What would that be called? Like a honorable mention scene is when they come to Numenor, like you mentioned, Brad. That was absolutely amazing. But was there any good scenes for you guys that I didn't mention? Do you guys want to expand upon that one?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I agree with you. I love that fight scene was really badass. The way they used the chains, it was kind of like Ghost Rider, like Kratos almost, like the way they were using the chains to fight. That was really sweet. And particularly when they all just like, the elves are a well-oiled machine, man. Like they're like, okay, we're gonna try to escape. And so as soon as they saw the moment, they turned, they got all of their chains right overlapped on top of each other, and then they're all in motion trying to free themselves from it at the same time. It was really freaking cool. I loved watching that. And then Arendir, when he jumped and he crushed down the canopies so that they would all be exposed by the sun, that was very cool as well. I will say that the one thing, I think we've talked about the CGI in the show and just how unbelievable and stunning it is for everything we've seen so far. There was one moment where I was like, wow, that was pretty whack, which was when in that scene when the warg, the wolf thing, comes out, and when he finally kills it by throwing the spear into it, when the spear hits him or hits the warg, it looked really bad, I thought. And maybe just go back and rewatch that one thing. But that was the only time I could say the CGI did not look good for me. But yeah, again, then once they go to Numenor, we touched on it before, and they have that kind of back and forth between the Queen Regent and Galadriel. I thought that just whole dynamic was really cool. They even have the back and forth where the Queen Regent goes, we weren't given anything. They paid for this isle with the blood of their kin. And Galadriel goes, then if blood be the price of passage, I'll pay it. But one way or another, I will depart. And the queen's like, I welcome you to try. You can try. And I just thought that was really badass from both. I mean, because Galadriel, obviously, like you said, is a badass. She's the commander of the Northern Elven Army. She's a veteran of many wars, and could easily take out probably most of the humans there. And the Queen Regent was not backing down at all. So she kind of stepped up there, and I thought that was pretty badass.
And I really liked too, like the scene. So you guys call him Tom Brady. What's his name? Haladrian?
No. Hallbrand.
Hallbrand, thank you, Hallbrand. Who am I saying, Haladrian? I love that little scene too between them when he's like, "Hey, like I want to try to start anew here. Like this is so great." And then they look like they're doing amends, but he gives her the dagger back. That was her brother's dagger. I really like that, and of course, it sets up that he is very sleight of hand and that he's very good at like grabbing stuff, which is important in this scene too. But Brad, how about for you?
Yeah, not really scenes that you guys haven't mentioned, but I do think it's kind of interesting. Like you mentioned, like Arendor's kind of like struggle, being like a prisoner for the orcs. I thought it was really interesting that episode 2 ends with him being kind of grabbed by the orcs and pulled in. And then episode 3, all this crap happens to him. You think he's gonna get out of it. And episode 3 ends with him getting pulled right back in. It's like, yo, you're in the same position you were, and you just lost like some of your closest companions. You had to chop down a tree. Like they're really doing a good job, like kind of developing that character. It's like you would usually expect, like, okay, by the end of the episode, he'll get out. It's like, no, a bunch of crap got worse for him, So I just thought that was cool, like the bookends of him ending episode 2 getting pulled in by the orcs, episode 3 him getting pulled back, and it's like you're not going nowhere. So I'm interested in seeing where that goes.
Did you recognize how when this episode opens and he's being dragged in and he's obviously the prisoner of the orcs, and they show all these orcs wearing these masks, and to me the masks looked exactly like almost like Khonshu, who's the
Moon Knight.
Moon Knight.
Oh, I spotted that guy.
Yeah, they even had the staffs that looked like the moon-shaped staff that Khonshu had too. So that was kind of crazy how they all had that look, which I don't know.
Yo, the multiverse is wild, man. The multiverse is wild.
No, we can talk.
I think it was really interesting too. Like we see, these are not the orcs that we know in Lord of the Rings, right? They are basically mole people. They can't go, they are so used to working underground and using these tunnels or working at night that they are basically hurt when they go in the sun. They're basically vampire orcs, it seems like. So I thought that was a really say that again.
That is a thing with all the orcs are like that, and that's why when they breed the urukai, they mix orc and goblin, and that's how they're able to be out in the sun.
Okay, thank you. That's really interesting. Oh, I hate the urukai. They're so creepy. No, but I really love, so obviously throughout the episode too, like you hear them all chanting like Adar, 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 like for Adar, and like there's all these mentions, and at the end you kind of see him, and there's references to most likely it's Sauron, because Sauron is known by a lot of names. So we're thinking it's Sauron, but he looks like almost human-like at the end, his shadow.
Yeah, so I think what it's going to end up being is that Adar is they're setting him up definitely to be the main antagonist of this season, whereas I think Sauron is the main antagonist of the series as a whole, obviously, and his rise to power. So I don't think that they're the same person, but you're right. And I think that a lot of the speculation online and just kind of where my mind races to as I watch this show is, where is Sauron? That's the big question. Where is he? Have we seen him before? Because at this stage in the story, Sauron is a shapeshifter. So he could be hiding in plain sight, as he's known to do. And so I really wouldn't be surprised if a character that we have already seen is Sauron. So whether that's Celebrimbor, who didn't see in this episode, the Stranger could be him, this Adar could be him, Hallbrand could be him. So it's really interesting to see kind of what's going on, and the speculation all over the place is pretty wild.
Yeah, and you did mention that in a previous episode too, that you think it's probably Celebrimbor. So that is a good point. Yeah, because at the end he does look very human-like to me. So I don't know if it's going to be Sauron or not. Brad, you were kind of nodding your head a little bit.
No, I think it's interesting that it really could be. I mean, there's like easy avenues for them to go of, it's someone who's already evil, but they could really pull the rug out from underneath us, and it'd be someone we like never saw coming, like a mile away. So it'll be interesting to see like what they do. And that's what I really enjoy, like how much of this is brand new. So it's got to be the first time, like, yeah, it's the foundation is there in terms of Numenor, and there are characters who are part of the lore, but there's so many new elements to this that I'm hoping like really diehard fans of the series are getting to be like, I'm getting new Lord of the Rings content. I'm getting to not know where things go and not know who's gonna do what. So I'm hoping people are enjoying that part like as much as I am, of being like, okay, there's like some familiarity here, but it's not a story where I know where every single direction is gonna go.
Absolutely agree. Now I think I skipped cringe moment on accident. We might have already kind of brushed on it, but you guys are very excited.
So me and Noah have both been like, we both have the same cringe, huh? So I'm really interested right now.
We'll see if it's true.
We might be completely off. Like I might say mine and Noah would be like, oh no, that's not at all what I was thinking. So Noah, was it the slow motion on the horse?
Yup.
Oh yes! Oh my god! One of my repressed memories, you guys. And she's like has the biggest. She never has smiled in her whole fucking life.
She's like, with that. She's like, he's like, yeah, we'll have to ride over to my place. And she's like, you said ride? And then she's so slow motion. She's like, yeah, dude. I know. And listen, if you're not watching on YouTube, this is the reason to watch on YouTube, if you're on Spotify or whatever, to see our stupid faces here. But yeah, the slow motion and her face, man, what was that?
It was like an anime, like a scene out of anime was sometimes like a character really likes candy bars and they see candy bar and like stars like burst in the head and like candy bar, like it was like that where I'm like, this is not fitting in at all, and I don't need to see a horse's face in slow motion, like
and its eye is like, and she's riding it with a big smile, and it was like and it lasted for such a long time. It was so bizarre.
Yeah, that was the epitome of cringe. Like that, I'm like, this is why we have the cringe moment award. This is why we have it for this right here.
This one now.
Exactly.
Okay, we were talking before, so we always try to at least semi-plan out like our segments before each episode, just to give you guys a little behind the scenes. And they were like doing this little thing. It was like, what's your cringe? Well, I don't want to tell you my cringe because I wonder if it's the same cringe. And for the life of me, I was like, that literally went straight to my repressed memories, because while I was watching, I'm like, this is fucking horrible. But like, I literally forgot it. I watched it yesterday. It literally went out of my brain. So I'm so glad that you guys brought that up. Her smile too. It wasn't like her, like, you know how she's very like sly when she does kind of smile or shows enjoyment. Like, it was like, she looks like a clown mask. Like, I don't even know how to describe it. She looked like a marionette doll.
Yeah, that was so bizarre and like uncharacteristic. I don't know, that was bizarre.
It was so weird. I'm so glad you guys brought that up. I would have absolutely forgot about that. Which, how can you forget? I will say though, the horse was absolutely gorgeous. It almost looked like a carousel horse. Like, it didn't look real. It had these, say that again?
And blue eyes.
Yeah.
Blue eyes, pure white, just absolutely gorgeous. It was, so that was beautiful. And the beach itself.
Yeah.
I want to know where that beach is. I need to go.
Yeah.
I want to know. So, like, obviously they filmed this all in New England, but does that mean they can't get establishing shots from other places? Like, you know, that's a wide shot of a beach. Like, maybe they filmed that elsewhere, and like, yeah, the scenes are filmed in New Zealand, because at that point you just punch in and you're on a beach, you know? So I'm really wondering, like, is everything we're seeing New Zealand?
I think it is.
That's
think it is.
incredible. That's incredible.
I mean, even Numenor, because the first thing I did, I paused as soon as we saw that opening shot of Numenor, I paused the show and I Googled where did they shoot Numenor, because it almost reminded me of what they did in Dubrovnik, Croatia, with King's Landing, and just some of these, like how the city was built, and it just looked so amazing. And it turns out, yeah, that was in New Zealand also, and it took them 5 months to build the set. And it was it wasn't, I mean, obviously there's CGI involved as well, but the whole thing was just a super intricate and complex set that was an entire city that they built in New Zealand.
That's incredible.
Wow, absolutely gorgeous. Yeah, so that's actually really incredible, because a lot of times too, if the CGI is really great, sometimes the sets kind of suck. If the sets are great, sometimes the CGI is bad, but everything really just marries together very well. But yeah, so moving on, I mentioned earlier that I really love Noah's setting the stage scene, but of course we would be remiss if we forgot about another favorite scene of mine, setting the scene with, not setting the scene. Oh my gosh.
Director's notes with Brad G. Fay.
Thank you, Noah. We're testing out Noah's hosting abilities, because sadly, some of us will be traveling in a few weeks. So that was a test.
That was a test.
Director's notes with Brad G. Fay. Yes, and for anyone who is not familiar, make sure to go watch Geek and You Shall Find. The documentaries on Amazon Prime, iTunes, as well as free on Plex and many other streaming platforms too. So Brad, take it away. What did your director's eye see in episode 3?
Yeah, I just love this episode. Like, can't say it enough, but I think, again, we really saw in this episode a lot of the parallels and influences for George R. R. Martin and the other fictional world we talk about regularly on this show, Game of Thrones. And, you know, I mean, just little things you get reminded, like the Ward. Like, okay, it's not a coincidence. Like, that's like a wolf-like creature in Game of Thrones. Like, when the Starks war gets their connection to like wolf-like characters. So little things like that was getting nice little reminders of how much George R. R. Martin pulled. But the main thing I wanted to focus on is the theme of nature and Tolkien's love of nature, and kind of the dichotomy we see between the two scenes. I don't want to give too much away about like Numenor and the white tree, but I thought it was really interesting that we go from the first time we get any mention of the white tree in terms of it, you know, explaining how it loses its leaves, and you kind of see they built this big city around this beautiful big white tree, and you see how important nature is to some characters. And in the very next scene, we go to the orcs giving instructions to the elves to chop down a tree, and you know, one of the elves is like, this tree has been here longer than you have, and like the orcs don't give a shit, like, you know. And it just, that was a big thing for Tolkien, is kind of like deforestation and what he felt was happening in parts of England, of just all these trees getting chopped down. It was kind of like, where are we going as society? What would a world look like without trees, without this relationship with nature? So I thought this episode did a really good job of giving us that 1-2 punch of what does society look like that builds this beautiful society around trees, and kind of, I don't want to say they work with trees, because it didn't look like that island was very populated with a lot of trees in nature, but you're already getting kind of hints that like, okay, the white tree is important. They built this, beautiful garden around it. And then you have the orcs that are like, chop that tree down. I don't care. We just want to get through this path. We're not worried about going around it or saving time. So I thought that was really cool. And that was kind of, the main thing that stood out for me. And it reminded me of like the mythology of the white tree in mythology. And of course, again, George R. R. Martin kind of using this with the importance of trees. And in Game of Thrones, you have the first men come and they're chopping down the trees and they're using them to build weapons and ships, if I recall right. And the children of forest are like, you're killing this part that's a part of us. And that leads to a war between those two. So just kind of those were just a few of the things that really stood out to me from this episode.
Yeah, and it was also really interesting too, because that's really kind of what sets off the elves really fighting back against the orc. They were really working to fight for this tree. So I think too, there is almost like a relationship between nature and especially elves. Like maybe they're tied to them or maybe just trees in particular. So I thought that was really interesting. And then it's also really sad too, because when you see the larger landscape of how there was already so much space that was free of trees already and like had been deforested, the fact when they were like, hey, we'll just go around it, we'll dig around it, which they easily could have done. There was nothing in their way, but they were just like doing orc stuff, like up into those little no good hooligans. They wanted to chop the tree down, so.
Well, so what's interesting about that to me, and it all is connected, right? So in this, they talk a lot about the Southlands, which we've talked about in this podcast already. And they don't talk about the Southlands in Lord of the Rings. In those movies, you never hear that, the Southlands. And the reason for that is because the Southlands become known as Mordor later. And that's where we are here. So what's happening right now with what the orcs are doing, all the deforestation, all that, they are laying the foundation of the area that will then be Mordor, where you don't see any natural life like that. And it's just a place for evil. And they talk about it in this episode where Galadriel realizes that Sauron's symbol is actually a map of the mountain ranges that are around Mount Doom. And so it's actually a map as well as a plan to be enacted in the event of Morgoth's defeat, where they'll create their own realm where evil can endure and thrive. So it fits perfectly with what you were just saying.
Yeah, and I thought that was a really interesting thing too. You guys were talking about how she was going through the scrolls, seeing if they had seen this symbol, but really they find out that it's a map, right? And they're saying it is the Southlands. And she's like, oh my gosh, she was right there. So it's something that we all should have seen, because to your point, we see a lot of that with Mordor, with the mountains, and like, it's almost like a little ring type shape. Or like a U type shape. So that was really interesting. But yeah, wow. Okay, so we don't hear about the Southlands because it turns into Mordor. Whew, you guys, there are so many callbacks. I freak out, especially because I obviously haven't read the books. I'm not that deep into it, but anytime I see something that's a callback to Lord of the Rings, the trilogy, it just absolutely blows my mind. So want to move on to this next little part about callbacks, or maybe any predictions that you guys might have. Noah, that was a great segue to that. Was there anything else that you happened to notice?
Yeah, the biggest callback and really where my eyes perked up a little bit, my ears perked up a little bit when I was watching this, when they mentioned the name Isildur. And so if you remember, Isildur is the person that he's the son of the king who cuts the finger off of Sauron and cuts the ring off of his hand to defeat him. And then he also foolishly decides to keep it for himself instead of throwing it into Mount Doom. And that's what really kicks off Sauron's return and the second coming of Sauron, which takes place in Lord of the Rings. So it was very cool. This is going back to my original MVP, where Elendil, he is the king. He is the king of Gondor that gets killed when his sword breaks in that battle that opens up Lord of the Rings, which is really cool. And that's when his son Isildur, who we meet, he's a rebellious teenager there, and we know that he'll become the future king of Gondor. And beyond that, it all leads back to Aragorn, where Aragorn is Isildur's heir, which is connected directly to the royal line of Numenorians, which allows Aragorn to have a strangely long life for a normal man. And the rest is history. But all of these things are connected. And so when we met Elendil and then we met Isildur, I thought it was really, really cool because of the implications and how that ties in with the larger story.
And Isildur becomes one of the wraiths, right? That we see in Lord of the Rings that are hunting, or is that someone else?
No, that's different. But I actually have a little note about that as well, prediction. But no, Isildur just gets killed when the ring betrays him, and then the ring sinks down into the bottom of the river or the lake, and it's found by Smeagol.
That's Sean Bean's like ancestor, right? That happens to. Isn't that Sean Bean's character like related to that person? And they're like, yo, your like great grandfather was the one who had the chance to get rid of the ring and
No,
did
it's Aragorn. It's Aragorn's ancestor, and that's why like Aragorn is so reluctant to lead, because he doesn't want to just be prone to the weakness that is in his blood, where he wasn't able to destroy the ring. But so Faramir and Boromir, Sean Bean, their father is the steward of Gondor, because he's not in line with the king. It's not in his blood, but he's the one that's currently ruling over Gondor during Lord of the Rings, because the king is not there, because there's no one that is of that line. And that's why they kind of try to fight when Aragorn comes back and is like, yeah, I am the rightful king.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I have some news for you, Noah.
What?
Some nerdy news for you. Actually, Isildur does become a ring wraith, because after his death, the orcs bring back his body to Sauron because he's mad at him, and they put a ring of power on his finger, turning him into a ring wraith is what it says. So like one of those 9 things that hunt Frodo, like those like Ghost King things.
Well, so
where are you getting this information? Where is this news coming from?
TolkienGateway.net.
Okay, I was gonna say, unless it's Tolkien Gate.
That's a notable fake news site.
They're known for their propaganda.
But so, well, no, the ring race were 9 kings of men that were gifted thousands of years before. Like as soon as you will see them in this, and so that's one of my predictions, actually, that Halbrand is actually one of these ring wraiths.
It seems like we're in a position right now to set up our first Chugler bet of our series. Whoever is wrong between the two of you,
we might both be right.
Chugler on air.
Well, I mean, I could see them bringing back his dead body to reanimate and do some evil things, but he is definitely 100% not one of the original Nazgul. Like, that is a fact. He's definitely not, because he was fighting against the Nazgul were in the war where he cut off the ring. The Nazgul weren't created.
Oh, okay.
So anyway, going back to Halbrand though, for me, there's just something that's not right about this dude. Like, he's like the Walmart Aragorn, like the fake Aragorn. And I think
the Dollar Tree Aragorn.
Yeah, and I think that's what the the producers are trying to invoke in all of us when we're watching, where you feel like this dude, he comes from nobility and he loses his place, and he doesn't want to go back, and he doesn't want to lead, and he wants to just start a new life and abandon all that. But yeah, I feel like that's on purpose, and I think that there's something with the way he kicked those guys' asses, the way he's just like, really, you could tell he's already manipulative. You saw in last episode, he didn't care when people would die around him. I just feel like there's something where this guy's going to go bad. And we already know that, the Nazgul were the kings of men who were corrupted by power and became these ring wraiths. And I wouldn't be surprised if he is one of them. And even the Witch King of whatever, the Witch King, whatever that guy's name is, because in this episode, Halbrand says, the heir to this mark, talking about the symbol on his necklace, the heir to this mark is heir to more than just nobility. It was for his ancestor who swore the blood oath to Morgoth. I'm not the hero you seek. It was my family that lost the war. So he went bad, or his family went bad. And I just think it's going to be a parallel to Aragorn, where Aragorn didn't want to lead. He was afraid that he would fall into that same trap that his family did, and he didn't. Whereas I think that Halbrand will end up going bad. So that's kind of my prediction there.
Those are definitely great predictions, and I can definitely see that happen, especially to your point, like they're talking about how, there's all this fate of like bringing back, like maybe it's not a coincidence that he ran into Galadriel and that he happened to be on that boat that sank, and that they happened to run into these sailors that will bring them back to Numenor when she's going to be the first elf that's ever been there. So,
and I mean, think about last episode when Galadriel is talking to the High King, And the High King says, and I mentioned this last episode, for the same wind that seeks to blow out a fire might also cause it spread. So whether Halbrand is Sauron or the Witch King or a Nazgul or something like that, the reason that he is there is because Galadriel is encouraging him, like, nah, don't stay here, like, come back to Middle Earth with me. And if he actually goes back to Middle Earth and causes chaos and, you know, causes all the destruction of that we see to come, it's kind of Galadriel's fault, which is, again, foreshadowed in the prior episode.
I will say, like, now that you say that, his power of being able to influence people with his words, like, he's very influential with what he says, and he's very targeted with what he says, really kind of reminds me of, was it Wormtongue? That,
Right.
you know,
Wormtongue.
Wormtongue, yeah, that he like whispers all the stuff to the king, and obviously he was a servant of Sauron as well. So there's definitely those powers to be able to be seen of like, you know, influence and being able to be sly with what they say and being able to influence people that way. Because anytime something is starting to go against what they need to happen, he just says, hey, everybody, look, we're here, we're friends. Look, let's just give us a few days. When he's about to get beat up because he's talking about like, oh, I'm going to take your women, when he's sitting there eating and drinking and Numenor's all their food and ale. He's like, hey, we're all friends. Like, you know what I mean? So like, yeah, he definitely
buy you a drink. It's fine.
Yeah. And then as he like not so slyly takes the thing that he needs off of them. Which also too, maybe, you know, he's very interested in becoming, I don't know if maybe they were gifted like elven steel or something like that, but he's also very like targeted and like he wants to be like a blacksmith or have access
Really
to like,
wants to get up in that craft shop.
Yeah.
Think about it. Well, what is the name of this series? The Rings of Power. It's all about the forging of these rings of power, which are done, you know, by a smith. And all of a sudden that's what's, you know, in his mind, what he wants to do. So I just think there's a lot of connections there that tell me that this dude is going bad.
Yeah. All right. Well, so before we wrap up the episode, is there anything else that you guys would like to talk about? One thing that I found interesting was that the queen at the end, she says, the moment we feared is here, or like, it's the moment that we feared, the elf has arrived. So I think that's definitely going to be interesting. Maybe Numenor has turned bad. Maybe, you know, that's part of the reason why they're against the elves, because they've been fighting Sauron and all this stuff. Who knows? But also kind of remind me too, we don't really see a lot of the orc, but a lot of the dwarf. We don't see any of the dwarves in this, but really reminds me, and like, I'm wondering if maybe the dwarves turn bad and then something happens where there's something between the dwarves and the orcs after they work together later, because in Lord of the Rings, we see that whole kingdom has been overrun by orcs and they were like basically murdered and stuff by them. So I don't know, something about the weird, I can't get over the box that they had and like that they're being so sneaky about it. So those are some of my watch outs.
Okay, cool.
Brad?
My only prediction right now is we're going to see some Harfoot people get left behind and sung about in song later about how they weren't really left behind. But
I can only hope they don't just trash them down the line and just freaking roast them for dying in a stupid way.
I think the whatever he is, whether he's a wizard or whatever, I think he's going to help them. And two, I will say that was really cute when like, you know, when he's so entranced and he finally sees the stripes of the stars and then he turns around and he's like, Nori, like when everyone's all like hiding us. It was so cute. He was like,
I don't want that guy to be bad.
Me either. I really hope not. It's going to break my heart.
Yeah.
It's funny that like people are either like, oh yeah, that's Gandalf when he was young, or yeah, that's Sauron. Like,
yeah, right.
The spectrum of who this stranger could be is really wide.
No in between. All right. Well, if you guys don't have any more predictions or anything that you guys would like to talk about, then everyone, please make sure to tune in to our next episode. We'll be outlining House of the Dragon, episode 4. That'll be coming up here in a little bit. Maybe Noah might have some more nerdy news depending on what is announced with Disney this weekend. But we are so thankful for you tuning in this week and every week. Thank you so much for all of your comments, your likes, your shares, and of course, listening in with us. We appreciate you guys each and every day, and we can't wait to see you / have you see us on the next episode of Geek and You Shall Find, the podcast. We'll see you then.
Bye, guys.
Bye.